Every now and then, I think about what I've read, what I'm currently reading, what I want to read in the future, and how well are all those things aligning with the books I'm now buying. And I like to think about my books topically and what is drawing me to them. And one of the things that I've noticed lately is that I really like books that are about family sagas or family dramas or multi-generational family stories, or so I think. So I decided to sit down and actually look at some of the books that I've read because I definitely know within this subgenre or theme or topic of families that there have been some books that I really have not liked. And I want to figure out why so that I can make better choices going into the future. Because I know I'm not going to stop buying books that are about families and have family themes, but I definitely want to figure out what it is about these family stories that I'm liking, because I feel like I'm getting like one end of the spectrum in terms of outcome or the other. So I've put together some graphics, I looked over some past reads, I've looked over some books that I currently have, and I'm just going to sit here and talk with you about them. So everything I discuss in this video in some way is going to have a topic in it that is related to families. Typically, I have tried to pick out books that are predominantly about family relationships, whether that's between a parent and a child, siblings, a married couple, multi-generations within the family. I feel like I'm leaving out some sort of family relationship, but you get the idea. And I'm going to start with the books that I have read, starting with books that I've given under 3 stars, so they've been a miss for me, as well as the books that have been a hit and have gotten 4 or 5 stars for me. I'm going to quickly talk about some books that are currently on my TBR, and based on what I've hopefully learned, whether or not I think I'll like those books, and then also based on what I've learned, some books that I would like to prioritize going forward in the future. So hopefully you'll enjoy this, and maybe we'll discuss some family relationship stuff in the comments below. Definitely just book family relationships, like not real life family relationships. Like nobody wants to go there. All right, let's go ahead and get started. So, like I said, let's go ahead and start by talking about the books that I've read that have gotten 3 stars or less. I haven't gone and labeled the books like with their exact rating, but just know that in the image you're going to see, there's only one book that I've DNF'd, that is The Bee Sting. I've DNF'd other family drama stories, but this is the most recent one. And I think it's pretty representative of all the ones that I've DNF'd. Everything else on the screen either got a 2 star or 3 star for me. So let's start with the DNFs. I have DNF'd 3 family stories as far as I can tell. They were The Bee Sting, The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois, and 100 Years of Solitude. The reason I put The Bee Sting on here was because the other 2 books I both DNF'd just due to content. There was certain type of graphic content, if you will, in there that just made me super uncomfortable, and it kept coming up, and I just could not continue in those stories. So that was actually more related to the content than either the writing style or the pacing or anything like that. The Bee Sting I put on this board as a miss because this was definitely one that I just wasn't into the family. I just wasn't feeling their story. I wasn't connecting with the characters, and I also wasn't enjoying the writing style to some extent, and I felt like the pacing was really slow. So I feel like those are things that I need to watch out for. It didn't seem to be an issue of it being multiple points of view. It really seemed to just be that it was a family that wasn't working well together. And even though the book discussed different members in the family, the book, as far as I was reading it, really wasn't about the family itself. It was really about these individual members in the family. And I think you'll see as I go along, I really like books that get into the inner relationships of the family members and how they interact with one another. And not that that was missing with The Bee Sting, but really it was just, I don't know, something about the writing and the pacing was just driving me crazy. So let's go on to the other books on here. The number one other thing that I noticed these books all had in common is, by and large, the majority of them are contemporary fiction in genre. And if that's not their main genre, it's frequently listed as their subgenre. And you know, when I think about it, that really shouldn't surprise me because I'm not actually a very big fan of contemporary fiction, and I know that. So I don't know. I will say some of these books, like Pineapple Street and Burnt Sugar, I actually read quite a while ago. So I don't know that I knew I wasn't as big a fan of contemporary fiction back then. And as far as Pineapple Street, Mame, and The Waters go, those were all book club picks. So I was reading them as part of a book club. So I guess I should also give myself a break on that. However, now I'm wondering, do I have other family stories on my TBR and on my bookshelves that are contemporary fiction? Let me go check. Okay, I did actually go and check the story graph, and I do. I have one, and it's, nope, right here on my bookshelf, Juja. And this is not a good thing because it's one of the other books that I DNF'd. And I think I said I didn't have, oh no, I guess I didn't DNF it, but I thought about DNFing it. And it's The Eighth Life, which is also on this chart. And it was, like I said, one of the books I almost thought about DNFing. Now, I will say this about the book. I did actually like the family relationship that was drawn in the story. The thing that I didn't like about it was that it was supposed to be a historical fiction, and it was set in Georgia. I thought it was kind of odd how the history was brought into the book, and I thought the story just went on for too long in a way that wasn't engaging enough for me to want to keep reading it. And I also thought the way the story was told was a little off for me. Now, Juja is a much shorter book, which I wish The Eighth Life had been, so crossing my fingers that that one will work out better. But other than that, I do have, I think it was like 20 contemporary fictions that are definitely along the lines of family stories, but I think they will work out better because some of them have a lot more conflict in them than some of the ones that you will see on this screen. The ones on the screen were definitely like low stakes, like interpersonal, petty drama for the most part, whereas the drama that is in some of the other contemporary fiction books I have are much heavier stakes. So I'm hoping that that will help because I think that's what irritated me about some of them. Like I'm thinking Pineapple Street, like there was a lot of conflict to some extent in the book, but a lot of it seemed to be like just pretty low stakes in the grand scheme of like all of the world, which is maybe asking too much, but there were definitely lighter reads. And I think with my family stories, I want there to be much heavier themes or much more profound themes and meanings throughout the book, and not just that the family is being dramatic. Hopefully that makes sense. I mean, that's not the case of all the books that I gave 3 or less stars to, but again, I think some of that also comes into the contemporary fiction genre, where then it's just not my favorite writing style. Okay, let's move on to books that I gave 4 stars to. These were all books that I thought were really good, and it was interesting. I did notice that there were a lot of tie-ins between them. There were a lot of similarity amongst them. Quite a few of them, if not all of them, were multi-generational stories, meaning that they did cover frequently multi-generations living together or very close together. You frequently got points of view from different generations, even in the stories like Shuggy Bane and Educated, where you maybe had just a parent-child relationship. There was still some element of that where like there was generational issues between them, or at least there were conflicts between the generations as opposed to between siblings. And I did notice that a lot of these are also cross-listed as historical fiction. So something about having like a multi-generational family story that connects like some aspect of history as well as culture and identity all seem to be things that they have in common. Like I'm thinking A Tree Grows in Brooklyn is one that you definitely hear about like multiple different ages and parts of family members. You focus on the children as well as the adults in there. It's definitely about their culture and living in Brooklyn at a specific time period. Cairo Trilogy, same thing. You're very much within the family and in their story. It's a very specific historic time period, and you see how the children and the parents are relating and struggling. Pachinko is a true multi-generational family where you've got three generations of family members, a very specific historic time period. So I think those are things that like are all getting closer to the mark for me. Why these books didn't get 5 stars, a lot of it sometimes had to do with pacing, or I would say they were all really good books, but just not ones that I feel like I would read over and over and over again. And I think that's really just personal preference thing. And for some of them, it was definitely the pacing or something towards the end or some part of the story just stopped working for me and didn't push it sort of like over and above the level of my wanting to read it again. Like I can think of something like that for each of these stories, but I think they're all really good. And I think if you like multi-generational stories, I guess, especially ones that like could be a multi-generational historical story, these all kind of in some way fit that vibe. I guess my grandmother asked me to tell you she's sorry. Doesn't really have a historical setting, but it's definitely getting lots of different generations and ages of people involved. And you also start leaning towards the found family, which I should say, I very intentionally didn't put any books on here that featured found family because I feel like that's a whole different vibe and there's a completely different reason for me that I like those books. And it has to do with that element of finding a new family. In some ways, I feel like I could almost just skip the misses and talk just about the 5 stars, the things that were hits for me that worked. But then I feel like I also only understand what I'm liking about these hits based on what I didn't like or didn't like as much about other stories. So again, you've got the multi-generational thing. All of these books I have given 5 stars, and with the exception of The Return of the Soldier, all of them for sure have to do with multiple generations of the same family. In some cases, like in Roots, you actually even get like the generations over a long period of time. I think you get a similar thing like that in the Joylet Club. And it's sometimes involving multiple families, like a War and Peace or a Suitable Boy or Anna Karenina, or again, the Joylet Club. You also tend to have like large family settings. I would say kind of the two outliers on this list would be August Town and The Return of the Soldier. These have a lot more to do with particular family relationships. And I would say that the reason that I really enjoyed these two books has to do with an element that is found in all the other books, which is there's some really high stakes going on with the families. There are some major conflicts happening mostly outside the family, but sometimes they're outside things that could affect the family dynamic. But overall, I find that the thing that I'm really drawn to in all of these stories is the love and the support that is found within the families, even if it's not done perfectly. So in Anna Karenina, even though there is a story of outside conflict that could ruin a family, there is also a plot line within Anna Karenina that follows the love story and the development of a new family. And the whole book is really about how different families go about trying to achieve and find happiness. The Joy Luck Club is definitely a story that covers family and generations and almost found family in a lot of ways, I would say. A Suitable Boy has multiple generations. You follow multiple families as well. The other thing I would mention that I'm noticing about these books is that most of them are really long, like 500 pages, 800 pages, 1400 pages. So I also think one of the things that I like if a book is really long and it's multi-generational is that you get to spend a very long time with each of the generations. You get to spend a lot of time with the family. And so you really get to know the characters in this family well, which I think you kind of need in a multi-generational family story because there's so many characters that if the book is really short, you're only, I feel like, just starting to know the character and then you've got to move on to another character's story. Or you're only getting to know one or two family members in each generation. And like when I think of a book like Pachinko, I think that was one of the problems that I had was that I felt like we spent more time with certain family members than others and not enough time with certain generations. And so then things would happen with them and I wouldn't feel as invested. So I guess for me, if I'm going to read a tome, I want it to be about a family, or maybe it's the other way around. If I'm going to read a book that's multi-generational about families, the longer the better. That's probably what it is. So if you like, family stories, you don't have to take my word for it that that's how these stories would work for you, but hopefully it gives you an idea of what's going on in each story. So if your preference differs significantly from mine, like maybe you really like, stories about siblings or something like that, at least you know that all three of the graphics that I showed you are all stories that have a huge family focus in them. So if you like contemporary fiction a lot, you might like any of the stories that I gave 3 stars to. It doesn't mean they're bad stories, it just means they weren't my favorite. But if you really like contemporary fiction, that might bring it up a lot for you. If you really like tomes, my 5 star reads might work really well for you. Or if you like stories that like mix like family drama and sagas with a lot of historical elements, my 4 stars might work best for you. So that's another way of thinking about this. All right, I do currently have some books that are on my TBR that feature family stories. One of them is off of that 5 star list. That is The Return of the Soldier. So nice, I'm reading it twice. And this definitely covers a sort of unique pocket of family stories that I like. One, it's super thin. Two, it's also a book that I really enjoyed the sort of like complicated family dynamics that were like just set up and then the conflicts that are created because of that. And I think there's some of that going on in Augusttown as well, which is the other book that I mentioned was a 5 star, but also on the smaller side. So that's definitely a unique family situation. The other book that I'm reading is Great Expectations. I feel like this gets a bit more into the found family area, as does just about every story that Charles Dickens writes that is set in a domestic setting. So I really like that. And at the time I'm filming this, both of those are on my current TBR, as is East of Eden. Now, this is probably the only one that's on my current TBR that I'm a little concerned about because something that I noticed tended to get rated low for me or that I didn't always enjoy in family stories is when there was like a family being destroyed by their own internal drama. Now, I don't know if the drama in this story comes from internal or external sources. You don't need to tell me. It'll just be a pleasant surprise if I haven't read this yet. But I do know that like the family's on a struggle bus, and it could be a decline of the family, kind of like in Bud and Brooks, which also has me concerned now because if you notice, my 5 stars were about like families who were supporting one another and loving one another. So I'm wondering if this is going to end up being a 4 star read for me because of that. On the other hand, I have heard nothing but good things about the writing style, and that was another huge point for me. And I'm pretty sure I'm going to like the writing style. So we'll see. Maybe I've already read it by now. If I've read those by now, I will put up on the screen when I show them to you what star rating they got. Other family stories that I'm looking forward to getting into based on my realizing that I like longer stories, I like multi-generational stories, or at least unique family setups, and that I really like to get into those types of things. So here's some of the books that are on my shelf that are family stories that I'm really looking forward to. One of them is The Edge of Water, and this is a story that sort of explores the relationship a daughter has with her mother. That doesn't always work for me, but it is literary fiction instead of contemporary fiction, so I'm expecting that to help with the writing style and to give more prominent themes than, say, that I found in Mame. So I'm hoping that this is going to be a very similar book, but one that will hopefully get a higher rating for me. Going back to family relationships and wanting a good writing style and books that at least give me a 4 star, meaning that they also have some sort of historical setting, I'm going with the Makioko sisters. I have heard nothing but praise for this book. I've owned it for a while and I don't know how it hasn't gotten on a TBR yet, but I need to put it somewhere, maybe facing out, so that I can remind myself I want to read this. This has everything that I should like. It follows sisters, it's about family and culture and tradition and history, and it's in a historical setting. It should be at least a 4 star for me, right? And it's also a little on the chunkier side. I think it is over 500 pages. Okay, I'm calling it right here. This should be a 5 star based on everything I just said. We'll see if that works out. All right, the next book I have is Yellow. I don't feel like I've mentioned this book in a long time, but this is a book that I received as part of the Archipelago book subscription that I had at one point, and I've feel like I've been kind of sleeping on this book. So while this book isn't specifically about this young man named Yalo and his family life, he does live with his mother, and it's the part of him that starts going into his family's past and learning more about them, where he ends up learning more about himself and having experience of self-discovery amidst a lot of like horrible social conflict and trauma. And that sounds like what I really like in family stories. I didn't necessarily mention that in the five-star ones, but a lot of them have to do also, including the four-star reads as well, learning more about yourself by learning more about your family or observing and absorbing more of your family's histories and traditions. And that sounds like a lot of what happens in this book. And so I'm thinking that it's probably going to be at least a four-star. I'm not sure if it'll be a five-star. There's aspects of it to me that sound like it style-wise might be a little bit more experimental or a little too literary for me, but I won't know until I start reading it. And then the final book I'm going to mention is Tomb of Sand. This is one that has to do with a daughter-mother relationship. It also has a historical setting. There is also more, not really conflict between the mother and daughter, is my understanding, but just sort of like the struggle for the mother and daughter to understand one another as times around them change and the mother changes. And this also has a lot to do with identity and tradition. So it seems like it has like all my buzzwords in terms of like multiple generations and a historical setting and all those things. So I'm thinking that this is going to be at least a four-star. It is super long, which would make me think maybe even a five-star. But as far as I know, the only generations it's covering is that between the parent and the child. So I don't truly consider that to be a multi-generational story, but I did have on that five-star list a couple of books that were just two generations interacting. So I do think I tend to prefer that over the same generation, but I guess we'll find out once I read these books. I will definitely check back in and update you on this hit or miss, maybe as a tier ranking next time with all of these books here. But it might be a while because obviously it's going to take me a while to read like these like extra like 8 or whatever books that I mentioned to you. So that's it. Let me know if you also like a story that's about family. Tell me below which ones you've read, especially if they have to do with multiple generations, if they are in some sort of historical setting, and if they really get into like the day-to-day life of the family and they're supportive of one another. All of those things together seem to be the things that I love, and hopefully you do too, and you have some even like, and you have even more recommendations for me. So that's it for today, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye.